keep in mind is there's a lot of concerns about this flight landing. And people have reasonably asked the question, why? They're scared, you're scared. We understand that. There's a lot about this virus that we don't know. But something that we also have to keep in mind is these folks need to come home. And in the hours of coordination calls and scheduling that we did last night to help stand up this response, one thing to me is perfectly clear. We've got a good perimeter out there to make sure that the public and those individuals stay safe. We have an appropriate plan in place for dealing with the situation that we have at hand, and we have good people on the ground to actually implement that plan. And I think most of all, we need to keep in mind that these people have done their job. And if there is an unthinkable event and we need to transport somebody to the hospital emergently, we can take every available precaution to make sure the public remains safe. As my colleague has pointed out, the risk to the public remains low, and we aim to keep it that way. These people have done their job, and on behalf of the County of Riverside, the Riverside University Health System, the City of Moreno Valley, and our partners in the Emergency Management Department, we want to say it's time for us to do ours. With that, I will hand it over to my esteemed bosses, the Board of Supervisors, and our Chairman of the Board of Supervisors, V. Manuel Perez.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming here today. I'm Riverside County Supervisor Victor Manuel Perez, and as Chairman of the Board of Supervisors, there is nothing that is more important to me, to my colleagues, than protecting the health and well-being of the residents of Riverside County. We have seen the devastating impact of the coronavirus on the people of China, particularly in the city of Wuhan, where thousands of cases have been reported. When I heard that the flight was coming to March Air Reserve Base, my first thought was about the passengers on the plane, American citizens, many of whom were simply doing their jobs. Then my attention turned to those who live near the base, which is located only a few miles from this medical facility. How would we ensure that those residents would be protected as well? It was at that point I recalled the past collaborative work of our departments like Public Health and Emergency Management, which has worked with partners during various incidents. My anxiety was eased as I was briefed about the planning for this event and realized the health and well-being of the passengers and nearby residents would be protected. It is that collaboration between Riverside County, state and federal officials that has led to the successful repatriation of the 200-plus passengers. Once again, Riverside County has shown that it can rise to the challenge. And well done, and I want to thank the County of Riverside, our departments, our staff, and as well the CDC, and I want to turn it over here to Supervisor Hewitt.
Thank you, Chairman Perez, and thank you for everyone for being here today. As we've shared, the safety and security of our residents is our top priority. While we realize that many people may be nervous right now, understand that we are committed to your safety and are taking all precautions to ensure both the passengers and our residents are safe. Here in Riverside County, we are proud to have March Air Reserve Base in our backyard, where we have the necessary resources to get this job done. As you can see, this is a very large response that involves many federal, state, and county agencies. And we're proud to have this fight land here, where we can welcome our U.S. citizens back home after a long, arduous flight and make sure they're well before they head back to their homes. Now I'll hand the mic back over to Jose for questions. Thank you.
I think, did you want to speak in Spanish too, Mr. Perez?
We'll wait to see if questions.
Okay. We do have one last speaker who's going to, Dr. Aguilera. Are you ready? Yes, for our Spanish language media, Dr. Adolfo Aguilera, family physician here at Riverside University Health System Medical Center.
Buenos días. Mi nombre es Adolfo Aguilera y soy un doctor general trabajando para el condado de Riverside. Para resumir los puntos que se han comentado, no sabemos mucho del virus ahorita. Sabemos que mucho de este virus, o la información para el virus no se sabe, pero estamos preparados para la gente que va a venir al condado. Y no nomás eso, pero estamos preparados y entendemos que ustedes están asustados, pero tenemos el personal y la capacidad de lidiar en este momento. Gracias.
And okay, I appreciate those with the microphones if we can be ready. And I please indulge me on this because it would make it. We like to have all the questions answered and understood. Tony.
Yeah, I have a general question for anyone who can answer it. Why was the plane diverted at the last second or last minute from Ontario International to the military base?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And this has been a rapidly changing situation and the way that we handle it. And the decisions, frankly, have been made at a high level in government. But I think the most important factor that was taken into consideration is the comfort of these passengers to staying, coming from this area. They have their own traumas, very long flight, and they could be at the base for up to 2 weeks. So we think that the base is probably the most comfortable accommodation that we could find for them.
Yes, down here.
Hey, Ian Lovett, Wall Street Journal. Could you explain the process? Please explain the process for screening passengers in terms of how long they might be held there, whether they'll be quarantined, in what way, and when they'll be allowed to go home.
So I'm going to turn to my colleague, Captain Knight. She's the lead of the CDC team on the ground that has been developing this protocol.
Thank you, Dr. Braden. So the screening process that has been utilized for the passengers on the plane began before they boarded the plane in Wuhan, China. The first step in the process was screening by the government of China officials at the airport as a pre-boarding measure. That was followed by a second pre-boarding screening by our State Department medical specialists. After boarding the plane, they had medical physicians from State Department on the plane with them throughout the flight, able to monitor them and address any issues or concerns that they had. The plane first landed in Anchorage, Alaska, where CDC's quarantine station team met the plane, boarded the plane, disembarked the passengers, and did yet another screening process. During the course of these screening processes, we check for symptoms that would be concerning of the novel coronavirus, including fever, cough, and other respiratory symptoms. We also check for factors that would make us consider an individual high risk. Exposure to someone who had known coronavirus in Wuhan, a close contact to someone living with or cohabitating with someone who had a death or pneumonia or known coronavirus. We also consider high risk as healthcare workers that could have had an exposure. So if at any point in time we have concern from those screening questions and the further evaluation that is done, then the individual would not be allowed to board the plane again and would be evaluated on site. Upon arrival here, we are doing the exact same process at the location at the March Air Force Base, and we are in the middle of that process going through the same screening questionnaire and evaluation.
Do you have any high-risk individuals on the flight?
So from the flight in Anchorage, when we assessed for high-risk individuals by the team there were no individuals that responded to the questions indicating that they were high risk. We're reassessing that now.
Over here, please.
Can you answer the prior question about quarantine? Is this a quarantine, and if not, what not? Are they allowed to leave, and what is the time frame for this?
So these people are not under federal quarantine orders. I've personally talked to them when they were disembarking and after they went through their first screening checks. They were happy to be here. They were very much cooperative with the questions, and also when I talked to them about their willingness to stay to be fully evaluated over 3 days or so, all those that I talked to were very willing to do that. They wanted to know their own status. They wanted to know the status of their children. They wanted to protect their family. They want to protect others. And so, these are obviously all American citizens, many of them who work for the State Department in the counselor's office. They are, I can just tell you that they were very happy to be here, and there was no indication that they wanted to leave right away. They wanted to know their status.
So are they isolated by choice, or are they required to stay there?
So what we're going to do, goes back to the basics of public health. We are going to monitor them for the full extent of their incubation period. We will do a full evaluation there, and everybody that I've talked to there has agreed to do that. If they were thereafter want to go on to their home state and hometown, we will pass on the information to the public health officials in that jurisdiction so that they can be actively monitored there for the remainder of their incubation period.
Originally, 240 people were supposed to be on board the flight, but that number was down to 201. Why was that the case?
So in Wuhan, there were the original manifest was, as you say, higher than the number of people who got on the plane. A number of people did not have the right documentation in order to be able to enter the United States. Some of them didn't show up for the flight, and our information is that there was one person who had fever who was not allowed to board.
So, Stephanie Elam from CNN, my question is, you said that they're going to be staying for a period of 3 days for the full incubation period. What exactly is that full incubation period? Because I think that's something that people are trying to...
Right. So we think that we can do the full evaluation in 3 days. Some of that evaluation is actually taking some tests and flying those samples to CDC in Atlanta, doing the tests and getting the results back. We're going to be monitoring them twice a day with symptoms and fever checks. At the end of 3 days, we think we'll have enough information to know their status and their risk. And at that point, given that they have no indication of a high risk or fever or other symptoms, we will allow them then to, they will be, they have the option to then go on in their travels with active monitoring where they will be going. So that active monitoring will be for a 14-day period.
In the back, please.
So let me just make sure I clarify, just to make sure I understand. Yeah. So you're going to keep you're asking them to stay for 3 days, but it could be a full 14-day period in which they could present symptoms in that time. But based on the first 3 days, you feel like you have enough information to know that they're probably okay. Yeah,
we'll be fully evaluating in that 3 days. No indication of any problems and so forth. They'll go on to their homes, but what we will arrange is that wherever they are, they're being actively monitored for that 14-day period.
In the back there, I'm sorry.
As ABC 7 News. My question to you is, if they're going to be released and the incubation period is within that time frame that she's discussing, how will they be allowed to go back to their homes? Will they be boarding aircrafts, buses, or taking private cars to their destinations? And are you going to ask them to remain in a secluded area until their incubation period is complete?
Yeah, so when we've done our entire evaluation, we think that that their status is low risk. Then they can travel, and again, when they arrive in the state where they're going, that state and local health department would be then responsible for monitoring them for the remainder of the 14 days.
So we've talked to passengers who said they've given nasal swabs or given blood tests. How long will it take to get those tests back to determine if they do in fact have the virus?
We think we can do that in the 72 hours.
In the meantime, where will you be holding these passengers?
So they're all going to be at the Air Force Base within the the accommodation that's been identified for them. I must say that some of them may choose to leave after 72 hours. Some of them may choose to stay for their entire 14-day period of incubation, and the base is ready to accommodate that.
Colin and Tagi Bezerson, can you tell us anything about the people? Are they all government workers? Are they tourists? And what part of the country are they from?
Yeah, American citizens. This plane was chartered in order to evacuate Department of State personnel working at the consulate in Wuhan, and because it's a large plane, other citizens could also be evacuated.
Kitty Alvarado from NBC Palm Springs. I've actually received messages from people who work on the base who say they're scared to death. What precautions are being taken for them? And also, are there children among those evacuated? And what are the age ranges?
Yeah, there are children, some as young as toddlers, I believe. I don't have the list of ages in front of me on any manifest, but of those I talked to,
1 month to 1 month to teenagers.
1 month to teenagers, I'm told. So there are family units coming back, as we would expect. And your other question was
about the employees on the base.
Oh. Yeah. So one thing that was made very clear with the base commander was that there was to be no interaction between those people who are on the base, who work there, who are in the military, and these passengers. There is a cordon that is there that we have established for the passengers. There are federal marshals there to keep everybody safe.
And also on your own website, a lot of the words say, we believe, it's thought to. You don't even know the incubation period fully or how it spreads. Why isn't it a mandatory quarantine there for those people who come from a region that's highly infected with the disease?
So you bring up a good point, and let me just say that we know about coronaviruses that have been identified in the past. Many of them are responsible for the common cold and are common. Some of them have emerged that we didn't know about before in the past couple of decades that are more severe. So SARS is a coronavirus, and of course you know that it was discovered and emerged in China again in the early 2000s. And then subsequently MERS, the Middle East respiratory syndrome virus, is a coronavirus. And so we have another novel coronavirus at that point that has gone on to cause severe illness in people. This virus is, again, new and novel. We didn't know about it infecting people before, but it is a coronavirus. We can extrapolate some from what we know about the other coronaviruses, including SARS and MERS, but we don't know a lot about this virus, about the severity of the illness, because we think probably many of the cases that were identified early were among severe illnesses, and so the severe proportion and the deaths may be high early on. We need to understand more about milder illnesses or even asymptomatic illnesses. In addition, we need to know more about when people become infectious. So those are things that we don't know. What we want to do is apply the public health principles that we know work. We've done that for Ebola. We've done that for SARS. We've done that for MERS. We've basically, those public health principles, those public health actions have stopped those outbreaks. There's no reason to believe it won't stop this one.
Tom Tucker, News Channel 3 Palm Springs. Is it possible that there are people on board that are carrying the virus and to have that go undetected until they reach their final destination? And the second part of the question is, for people here on the ground, what would you tell us and others who might be concerned and what they can do to protect themselves and their families?
Right. So the reason why we want to do active monitoring for 14 days is in order to be able to determine if they may become ill at some time during that period of time. And then we can isolate those people so that they don't infect others. That's the basic public health premise of our actions. And that's what we intend to do for the entire 14 days, no matter where they are. And your other question was?
For those on the ground here
Yeah.
and across the country who might be concerned about picking up the virus from those who just arrived this morning,
Right.
what do you say to those folks in order to protect themselves or any precautions being taken?
Yeah, again, I would emphasize, we have 5 confirmed cases in the United States. All of them were identified very early in their in their illness. They were isolated very early in their illness. We've identified the contacts for those people and are monitoring them. That's the basics I've been talking about. There's no indication that we have any transmission ongoing from those cases, and therefore the risk for people in the United States, we believe, is low.
Yes, over here.
Mundo, thank you. I'll hold it if you don't mind. Okay, fine. Medical experts mentioned that the symptoms of the virus comes up after 2 weeks of infected. Why not keep it at 2 weeks in order for the whole state or country to be safe?
Yeah. So again, these people will be monitored for the entire 2 weeks of their illness. We will have the intensive assessment for these first 72 hours to make sure that nobody is ill now. That's what that is what we are doing at this point. They're all undergoing extensive evaluation.
So they'll be monitored for sure for 2 weeks, but not necessarily here.
Correct.
What happens if somebody turns up positive? Is everybody on that plane now going to have to be treated?
So if somebody turns up positive, it depends on when their symptoms start, okay? And our whole evaluation of when the infection, could have been spread. We've been monitoring them all along the way. So that evaluation we will do. It is possible if there is somebody who we think may have been infectious even on this flight, then we will take that into consideration as a contact for the rest of the people that are there.
And will they end up in this hospital? Where do they go?
No. Just because you're a contact doesn't mean you end up in the hospital.
But if you have it, are you going to end up here?
Yeah. So if somebody, any of these patients become ill, then we have a whole protocol that's worked out whereby they are transferred to this facility for further evaluation.
Some of the symptoms, it's not going to show us like within 2 weeks. And you mentioned that you're going to monitor that, but can you give some more details about how monitor that? Because everyone, they have their daily activities and daily life, and how you monitor that every time that when they have the symptoms on this.
Yeah. So when they're here, they're being, they're not mixing with other people in the community, whether that be on the base or otherwise. And so while we do this evaluation to make sure that none of them are actively infected, then, they're in a safe environment as far as the community is concerned, okay? When we talk about active monitoring, into the future and even when they leave and they go to their home state, usually that consists of at least once, often twice a day, for somebody from public health reaching out to say, do you have any of these symptoms? Tell me your temperature or I'm going to take your temperature. So twice a day you're going to pick up something very early if somebody becomes ill.
Over in the corner.
Do you want me to talk a little bit about the medical?
Go ahead.
Greetings. I have two-part question. Number one, there's rumors that are going around that this was a weaponized virus in the laboratory in Wuhan, and as everybody's still trying to figure out, why isn't this a federal mandatory quarantine?
So let me just talk about, a manufactured virus. I explained a little bit about coronaviruses before. We know about coronaviruses. They are around us. The ones that cause common colds are common, and we've known of ones that were novel at the time and cause severe disease. These viruses are not, as a family, are not new to us. This particular one is a little bit different than the others, and we have to find out how it behaves. The other question was, right. So what we do is we try and balance how to protect these people, how to respect their rights, how to be as least restrictive as possible, and still be very careful about the evaluation that they go under, so that everybody is safe. So this is a balance, and if we can do that without a federal quarantine order that restricts people and takes away their rights, that's what we will do. But we are very careful to make sure it's safe.
72 hours, is it possible that these people, if you see that they are not exhibiting any symptoms, that they will then get on a flight and go to their home state and could potentially still be sick, but you wouldn't know it until the end of the incubation period, the 14 days? In other words, they could potentially be exposing other people.
So when we talk about transmission and what we know about coronaviruses and so forth, and this applies to other types of infections for the most part, is that, people incubate the infection. While they're incubating, they're not sick and they're not contagious. They become ill and they then become contagious. If we can monitor people so that we can pick them up very early in their illness and isolate them, why then we can prevent transmission. That's the basic public health premise that we work by.
Okay.
I just need, if you guys can give us a breakdown of the 201 passengers on the flight, would you characterize them all as American citizens? Do you have numbers as to how many were passengers coming from Wuhan, how many were workers? And then I also want to know that since it was a chartered flight from the CDC, I just want to confirm that no one had to pay for a ticket. This was completely an open invitation to come on this flight. How did it work?
So maybe to clarify the flight itself, the Department of State chartered the flight, and that is because of the situation in Wuhan. State Department put in place an ordered evacuation for their diplomats. So that is part of the protocol that exists within State Department when they reach certain trigger points within a country, whether it's war or whether it's an infectious disease outbreak. If they hit a certain trigger point, they will implement their protocol. By implementing that protocol, that also, because of as you heard earlier, that flight was large enough to accommodate more people than their State Department diplomats and their families. So State Department was able to offer seats on the plane as a service to other American citizens and their families who wanted to also depart Wuhan. As to the, I think you asked about the cost. I think that would be a question that you would have to ask State Department. But it was a service that was offered because they were able to provide it to the American citizens.
I'm sorry, one last question. I'm sorry, I just lost it. So you said it was chartered by the State Department to get everybody out of there. The 72-hour hold, would we be notified if anybody decides to leave that earlier?
Maybe I'll talk a little bit more about the 72-hour hold. There seem to be a lot of questions about that. And then I can turn back over to Dr. Braden as well. With the team that's on the ground, that's not just CDC's public health professionals. We have healthcare professionals from the county, the county public health department that have joined us. We have health professionals from the hospital here. So Dr. Braden has talked about the monitoring process. That's an extremely important part of what the team is doing on the ground. The CDC team is doing a check for symptoms, including temperature, every 12 hours during this 72-hour period. At the same time, the hospital has provided a mobile healthcare unit, which is on site near the facility where the individuals are being housed. So if a toddler falls down and scrapes his or her knee, they can go there to seek medical care. If someone develops a fever during the middle of the night and it's in between their 12-hour temperature checks, they have a number to call for the physician that is on site during the night to come and evaluate them. So it's truly a collaboration across the span of public health professionals and clinical health professionals, from the federal to the state to the county and the hospital level.
But you're operating under the impression that everyone will stay for those 3 days. If anyone leaves before, right now they're saying that they'll stay for the 3 days. But if anyone leaves before, will we be notified, and how would that be handled?
So another thing that Dr. Braden talked about is that we are also offering laboratory testing to these individuals. It is our desire to make sure that we can turn around those laboratory results as quickly as possible, but there are a lot of logistics involved in that on this side as well as on the CDC Atlanta side. The CDC Atlanta lab is the only laboratory in the country that is able to do this testing for the novel coronavirus. And so we will get the samples to that lab as quickly as possible. If we're able to do that and get results in under 72 hours, and those results are negative, that's a conversation that we need to have across CDC, across our local counterparts, with the individual. If they're asymptomatic, their results are negative, are we all comfortable with having them go home before that 72 hours, or do we wait that 72 hours? It's a close collaboration with all of us to make sure that we're taking all of the important information into account. And as Dr. Braden said, that even with that negative result, we will still be monitoring through our state and local health departments those individuals for the full 14 days.
Are they forced to stay here for the full 3 days? Because you said they're not under quarantine, so can they be relieved before that period?
Yeah, a quarantine would be forced. As Dr. Braden said, this 72-hour period, we are respecting the rights of them as individuals, and we are doing that in a way that protects their health, the health of the uniformed service members that are on that base, and the health of the community around them.
So that means they can, in fact, leave for 72 hours?
It's totally voluntary. It just, you've referred to it as a hold. You're saying it's not a quarantine. If it's a hold, it doesn't sound voluntary. What exactly is this?
Can they leave, yes or no?
They can leave. However, they are sitting in the middle of a military base. Any discussion around departure would be just that, would be a discussion.
You told us I have other needs. Is that correct? No one will be leaving before 3 days, no matter what.
No.
No what?
So they are not under a quarantine order during the 72 hours.
If someone demands to leave today, right now, what happens?
If someone demands to leave right now, that is where all of the partners that you see here in front of you, as well as the other partners that are engaged in this mission, would come together and talk about what needs to be done. And this would be discussed up to the highest levels within the U.S. government as well. So we would ensure that we are making the right decision for the American people.
Why is there a breakdown of cities where these people are from? And are they going to leave on chartered flights, public flights? And will the people on board those flights be notified that there's someone who just came from Wuhan on board? I mean, what are their rights? What are the people outside their rights if they can leave before the 2 weeks when you guys don't even know? China health officials have said it spread before there's even symptoms.
Okay. I can tell this is causing a lot of confusion. Let me try and bring hopefully some assurances to what we can do, what we will do. If we think that a person is a danger to the community, we can institute an individual quarantine for that person, and we will. Not only will we, but if it's in this county, then the local county health officer likely will do the same. So this is something, it's a judgment call about how risky this action is on the part of this person. If we think it's risky, then we have the tools to protect the public, and we will use them. If we don't think it's risky, and it's before the 72 hours, and we know that where they're going, they have a fairly short flight, they're going to be met at where they're going to be in the jurisdiction where they're going. The public health is fully engaged. They're going to be monitored. We think that we can that we can assure the protection in that way, because monitoring will not stop.
But you didn't answer the question. Is there a breakdown of cities where the people will be flying? Is it a public flight? Will the passengers be notified?
So if they're allowed to fly, they're considered not infectious. They're not, and therefore those passengers would not be considered contacts to an infectious case.
China health officials have said that people are infectious before they even present symptoms.
So we don't know that. We've heard one China health official say that, but we don't know that that's the case.
Well, I guess that's the key word. We don't know.
Yes.
And that's what is scaring everyone.
But it comes down to these blood tests too, right? The blood
Yeah.
tests are pretty definitive.
So we are, when I've talked to people, everybody wants to know their status. And it's for their own health, it's for the health of their family and so forth. And that's what we would expect. All right? So this testing will help us determine their health, in addition to ongoing monitoring and very detailed assessment of their contacts and risks.
So, but it sounds like to me that these are people that you feel like are going to be, you're counting on them to be good Americans, and if they feel like they have any symptoms, they won't do this. Either State Department employees or family members, right? So that's the reason why you feel like you don't need to put them in quarantine.
Well, but remember, if we feel like we must, we will.
But you're counting on them to be good Americans and just not rush out after just one day or something like that, correct? And then also my next question is, how do you treat this coronavirus, this novel one? Is it different than you would treat a cold or a flu? Is it something that you would have to do special other than the way we would normally, convalesce?
So I'll put on my physician hat.
Yes, Dr.
So unlike flu, for instance, there's no vaccine for this virus, and we don't know of therapeutics that work, although that's something that we need to test. So some of the tools that we have in order to treat people we don't have for this virus at this point. I can tell you that many people are working hard at that right now. What we can do is we can support people in the normal way that we would to make sure that they're oxygenating properly, that their blood pressure is supported, and so forth, so that they can heal themselves. And in most instances, actually, people don't even actually require hospitalization. We've seen a lot of mild illnesses. For those that are severe illnesses, we can support them. Unfortunately, we've had 132 deaths around the world at this point.
As a physician, are you more concerned about this or the flu?
Depends on the flu. There are more flus that are more scary than this one.
Dr. Braden, my question is to the CDC is, obviously this is Wuhan. If this virus starts to grow in China, obviously there are other American personnel there. Does the CDC have plans in place to do similar evacuations of personnel in other consulate or embassies in China?
I would have to defer that question to the State Department.
Okay. Well, listen, thank you very much. Some of the participants up here will be available for stand-ups if they're needed. I did want to point out, I know there's a lot of anxiety out there. We have created a public line for the public if it's interested in talking to somebody about information about it. 951-358-5134. That's a line for the public to call if they have any questions about the coronavirus. Thank you very much.
Dr. Braden, yes.
Oh, yeah.